Right out of law school, I took a job working for Progressive Insurance Company in their in-house counsel firm. So all my cases were Progressive car wreck cases, which I always tell people that, if you want to do injury work and want to do trial work, I can't think of a better place to start, right? I mean, the pay's not great. That's, I guess, the big downside. But when you're right out of law school, don't have a family yet, the pay isn't really quite as important. Your financial obligations aren't as high. So why not start at a place where you get experience right out of the box? I mean, I remember day one, Jeff Yashinsky, who I'm sure he was my boss, and he came in, he's like, all right, here's your 5 cases, 10 cases, whatever they are. It's like, go. I'm like, really? What do I do? He's like, oh, you'll figure it out. Now, he said it in a good way. It's not like he just threw me to the wolves, but point being was that these cases were all pretty small.
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. Today's guest has been a long time coming. He had me on his podcast a while back, maybe before I started mine, but really excited about having Josh on today. We've got Josh Stein. He's a personal injury attorney here in Atlanta. Josh, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us about your firm, what you do, how many people you got, all that stuff.
My man, Mr. Hawkins, appreciate you having me here today. I've been looking forward to doing this ever since you had told me that you're going to start your own podcast. So I'm proud you're doing it. You've got all sorts of good episodes out already. You having a good time so far? Enjoying it?
I am. Meeting a lot of cool folks. It's fun.
Well, you're a pro at it already. So, but yeah, my name's Josh Stein. As you said, I'm a lawyer here in Atlanta, focus on personal injury work. I've got a real small firm. I'm sure we'll talk about it, but came from larger firms and wanted to have my own place to practice and have a small firm. I've got 2 kids, 16 and 13, so pretty busy with them. They're pretty awesome ages right now. We handle all personal injury matters, car wreck, truck wreck, slip and falls, dog bites, security cases, shooting cases, you name it. If somebody gets badly hurt, then we'll handle it, except for medical malpractice. We do no medical malpractice cases.
So your 16-year-old, he or she driving yet?
Yes, newly minted driver. I'm talking within the last 2 or 3 months driver.
Scary as hell, right?
Scary as hell, but pretty awesome. I mean, it kind of opens up your entire world, right? Like, getting her to volleyball practice, she just goes. Getting her to school, function, she just goes. She takes her brother to his places. So once we got past that initial, well, you never get past it, right? You never get past it. But now that we're more comfortable with it, it's pretty life-changing.
Nice. Well, congrats. I feel like, there was a while there where the kids were like not driving. They didn't want to drive at all. And I feel like maybe it's coming back a little bit. When we were growing up, day of, I was there getting my license day of,
You nailed it. I mean, there was a minute there where these kids, and still some kids, they don't go get their license right away. You and me, day of, man, we're ready to go. But Isabella, my daughter, she was always somebody that wanted her learners, day she turned 15, and then, you have to have it for 365 days now. So or 366. And once that day came, we were at the DMV and she was ready to roll.
Nice. I guess they have all those rules. You can't drive your friends around, something like that.
Yeah. Rules. I'm using some quotation rules. The kids don't seem to be overly concerned with violating those rules. But there's certain curfews, there's a certain amount of people you have in the car. So all that's good. As an injury lawyer, I understand that and respect that, right? I mean, we see a lot of defendants that are 16, 17, 18 and making dumb decisions. And, the last thing you want is to compound that with having 3 or 4 other kids in the car, right? So I'm totally on board with all those things.
That's right. You up your insurance too, right? Make sure
Let's not talk about the price of insurance now.
Oh, yeah. Plenty of coverage. Well, cool. Let's switch back. So you got your own firm now. You do, plaintiff side, personal injury, but you didn't start out there. You started out on the defense side, right?
Yeah, right out of law school, I took a job working for Progressive Insurance Company in their in-house counsel firm. So all my cases were progressive car wreck cases, which I always tell people that, if you want to do injury work and want to do trial work, I can't think of a better place to start, right? I mean, the pay's not great. That's, I guess, the big downside. But when you're right out of law school, don't have a family yet, the pay isn't really quite as important. Your financial obligations aren't as high. So why not start at a place where you get, experience right out of the box? I mean, I remember day one, Jeff Yashinsky, who I'm sure he was my boss, and he came. He's like, all right, here's your 5 cases, 10 cases, whatever they are. It's like, go. I'm like, really? What do I do? He's like, oh, you'll figure it out. Now, he said it in a good way. It's not like he just threw me to the wolves. But point being was that these cases were all pretty small, right? They've got, small injuries. And so you can't really mess them up too terribly bad. So what better place to learn? You're taking depositions right away. You're talking to clients right away, getting trials, experiences right away. And that doesn't happen in some of these bigger firms where they just give you documents to review and, briefs to write, and all that is great experience. But for the kind of work that I'm doing, I feel like where I started was really, really helpful.
Yeah, I'm with you. My dad was a lawyer, and he, some of his advice was go to a small place where you'll get experience quick, And in my view, there's really there's many, many paths, but, the one that the law schools seem to sell you is go to the big firm, blah, blah, blah. And sure, they pay you a ton of money, and you got student loans. That's one approach. But that, in my view, that's sort of a shorter view of your career approach versus go somewhere smaller while you're young. You don't have all the responsibilities and get just tons of experience. And I'm more in that camp. So yeah.
Totally. It's funny. I mean, me and you were both at UGA Law School at the same time. And, you remember those on-campus interviews. Everybody's fighting for the King and Spaldings and Troutman Sanders and Austin and Birds. Like, those are the coveted jobs that pay the most, and they're so prestigious. And they are, by the way. They're great. But how many of our friends do we know that were there for a year or 2 years or less and go somewhere else? So it's like, you fight to get these positions. And was it the best place for some people? Yes, it was, and actually still is. But for me, it sounds like for you, a smaller place where you can get more experience, I think in the long run is a fine way to go.
Yeah, I went sort of it was a med mal defense firm that I went to at the time. Your office mate Goldner was there, and it was good. We got tons of experience. So let's talk about you. So you got thrown out there. You immediately started doing depositions. Did you get a lot of trial experience? Were you able to do that?
So we called it Thursday night fights. And what it was is Magistrate Court in DeKalb County. Every week at 6:00, they would hold these big calendar calls, and they'd call in 50 people, and probably about 10 of them were some crazy neighbor dispute. 10 of them were, over a couple $100, because Magistrate Court, is the $15,000 limit for which the amount in dispute can be in controversy. And so they also had about 10 or 15 car wreck cases, all of which had value less than $15,000. Again, you can't mess these things up. So yeah, every Thursday I'd have 1 or 2 cases on that calendar, and it would be the same case. It would be a rear end case. It'd be low property damage. It would be an ER visit with a couple $1,000 hospital bill. It would be a couple chiropractic visits or therapy visits, or maybe an orthopedic visit or 2. Progressive was offering, let's call it $5,000. Plaintiff wanted $15,000. So there you go. We were at an impasse. Thursday night fights, go let the judge decide. Judges are smart. They get it. They figure out what that number kind of in the middle is, and that's usually what they would award. And the case ends. But the experience being on your feet every week was great. Kind of pain. Looking back, I remember driving to DeKalb County at 4:00 to get there for the calendar call before 6. You sit there, you could be the last one called, home at 10. Not very glamorous, but really good place to learn.
I love it. The low stakes is huge. You got. And because you're sort of, like you said, doing sort of the same case every time, so to speak, you can experiment. You say, well, last time I tried this, and this time I'm going to try that. And then you can just, like you said, you're on your feet, you're experimenting, you can do all this stuff, and it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
Right.
I remember driving him a few times, and the judges, they understood, right? Like, they could tell the person that was like right out of law school and had done this only a handful of times. And, some will very politely kind of interject what kind of should happen or the arguments. I remember driving home a few times and be like, I'm a freaking idiot, man. Like, I can't believe I didn't even think that was going to be something that was important to the judge. But you learn every time, and it just builds on itself. And then you start trying jury trials again, stakes not that high. Maybe now it's $25,000 at stake. And then you just build yourself up. And that's just kind of how I went about it.
And so you got a lot of experience. You got to pick juries. You got to cross-examine. You got to, prepare your client. All those sorts of things you got to do getting ready for trial. So you got a lot of that. But and you worked your way up. You eventually made partner wherever you were. But at some point you said, "Hey, I want to do something else." So what was going through your mind there?
Yeah, so I left Progressive, went to Goodman, McGuffey, Lindsay & Johnson, defense firm all across the Southeast. Great people, great firm, great lawyers. Have not a bad thing to say about that firm. They taught me a ton, treated me very well, gave me even more great experience. But it got to a point in time where, I was into my 30s and had made that decision, right? It's like, is this where I want to be the rest of my life? And what I mean by that is this firm doing that kind of work, because I wasn't going to leave there to do the same thing somewhere else. It was just too good of a spot for me. But do I want to continue doing legal work? The answer is yes. Do I want to continue doing trial work and injury work? The answer was yes. But I don't really want to do it on the defense side forever. And I was kind of at that point where if I kept going another year, it kind of almost becomes too late. And so I made the decision that I was going to, make that move. And Andy Goldner, who you referenced, a friend of mine, and he had, we had kind of needs that were kind of similar at the time, and joined up with his firm as a way to kind of get into that world of plaintiff's work. And that was, 7-8 years ago, and one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yes, let's talk about sort of the transition from, steady paycheck, hourly practice, defense practice, and then switching to the plaintiff side. And I know that's a path that a lot of the plaintiff's attorneys take. I've seen it, you've seen it over and over and over. But some try it and they can't make it. It's a completely different mentality. Instead of reacting and stalling and all that stuff, you got to push. So how did you adjust when you made the switch?
Yeah, so I tell people there's never the right time to make that move. Like there's always going to be a kid in daycare. There's always going to be some expense that's coming up. You can come up with 1,000 reasons why financially I just can't leave this steady job. And all of them are very sound reasons. But at some point, you just have to make the decision to do it. And I think that's the hardest part, right? I mean, of all the things doing to get a successful practice, I tell people making the decision and following up on the decision to move is probably the hardest. I mean, you see tons of people that start their own firms, and maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, but that's my experience, is just actually making that decision and acting on it is the hardest part. We're all smart, everybody's hard work, everybody's motivated, but it's hard to pull that trigger, and it took me a while to do it. But once you do it full bore, like you said, the plaintiff's practice is totally different than the defense practice, which is why I wanted to join up with somebody who could really teach me versus just kind of be on my own and figure out myself. And that's why Andy was such the perfect person for me to join up with.
And so how did you bridge the gap? Had you saved up money? I don't know if you had any kids at that point. What's your wife saying? You're like, oh yeah, let's do it. How do you convince the family that, hey, this is a great idea?
Yeah, totally. I mean, 2 kids. My daughter was probably 8 or 9 or whatever the math is. They're both in public school, so that helped. They're both out of daycare. I had saved up some money. I told myself that, I'd give myself a year. And if I'm not able to do something in a year, then I always have the old firm to fall back on. I always have my law degree to fall back on to go somewhere else. So I felt like if I saved up enough money to live for a year, one of 2 things were going to happen. It was going to be great. I was going to be able to continue on down the path I wanted to go on, or I say, you know what? I tried it. I have no regrets. We were able to live, eat, sleep, everything for the year. Now I'll go back and do what I was doing, which, by the way, I enjoyed doing. So that was my kind of mentality. I think I gave myself kind of a fallback by saying, if I make $0 in the next 12 months, it's going to be okay. And then you just put your trust and faith that it's going to be okay. And fortunately, it was.
So when you went to law school, did you know that eventually you'd be opening your own firm? Is that something you sort of always knew you might want to do?
Well, my dad's a dentist. And so he always worked for himself and had his own practice. He was never one of these guys that worked at corporate America. He never had to travel away from us for business. He never missed a baseball game or my sister's cheerleading event. because of work. And that was something that was not missed upon me, as opposed to my friends' parents who, had obligations with their jobs in other cities or whatever it might be, and they couldn't always be there. They weren't always home for dinner. Or they would get transferred from one city to the next because the job, took them there. So I guess somewhere in my brain, I said, I want to be in control of my kind of life as well. The only way to do that I know of is to have your own company, your own firm. So I think that ultimately that was something I was going to do, but I had no visions when I'm walking across that stage in Athens that like, this is going to happen in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. I think that it organically kind of fell into place.
So another question. So when you were in law school, did you know you want to be a trial lawyer? Did you know eventually you want to do plaintiff's work?
No. I mean, that's where I got the job, to be honest with you. When you interview after first year, after second year, and I got the job with the people at Progressive. They saw something in me they liked. I liked them. I liked the work. I knew I didn't want to do criminal work. I knew I didn't want to do bankruptcy work. I knew I didn't want to do family law work. But outside of that, I probably would have gone anywhere where the right job was that I felt was the right job. And then once I got there, I just liked it.
It's funny how these things happen. I've told this story, but my dad was an attorney, so I sort of knew a little bit about it. When I went to law school, I wanted to be a plaintiff's lawyer, plaintiff's trial lawyer. That's what I was going to be. And I tried to get a job straight out of law school. I was a little naive there because most plaintiff's firms don't hire people right out of law school. There's a couple, but not many. And so I ended up going to the defense side, and then I've never done it. So I've just never happened. But I really wanted to do it at one time, and it's just my path went a different way, and I doubt it will ever happen at this point.
Well, the path you've gone down has been pretty awesome, too, if I might say so myself. So I think things do work out.
All right, so you sort of did a bridge time with Goldner. You joined him for a little while, and then eventually you left there to straight up do your own thing, right?
Yeah. So the idea with Andy, I didn't feel like I was is bona fide the right word? I wasn't bona fide to be a plaintiff's lawyer without really ever done it, ever having done it before. I had no clients. I had no forms. I didn't really know how to do that part of it. And so I felt like that sell to a client wasn't really that strong, But Andy, one of the best lawyers in the state doing plaintiff's work. And so I'm like, well, he has this need, and, I can kind of learn from him, and I can use his reputation and his firm and his website and his results and all that he has to package this to a client that is pretty damn compelling, right? And so that was kind of the thought process. And he's a great guy, and I knew we were gonna have fun together and do a good job together. And so that's what we did. I mean, I think both of us were under no kind of illusion that it was going to turn into some like lifetime partnership, or we were going to be together forever. I mean, I think that we both kind of had an understanding of what my hopes were. And of course he was like, yeah, man, that's great. And so, it took me, I think, 3 full years to really feel comfortable that I knew what I was doing. I had enough success to finance myself exclusively. I felt like I had a pretty good source of referrals, other lawyers, pretty good, prior clients, relationships that were sending me stuff. So, we just went and had lunch one day, and we're like, yeah, now's probably about the right time. And it turned out it was January 2020, right before COVID. So, if timing can be anything, it can be that. And so there I was, January 1st, like, hey guys, here I am. And then the world stops. So you can
best time ever. It's the best time ever, right?
I get through anything. That's what I tell people. So yeah, that's 4 years ago now, almost 5.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second, about COVID. But it sounded like with you and Andy, it was win-win. And you guys still sort of share some office space, don't you?
His office is next door to mine. We're on a lease together, my firm and his firm. We try cases together. We probably have 5 or 10 cases we're working on at any given time together. So yeah, I mean, we still are every day working on stuff together, involved together. It's just now I've got my own firm. He has his own firm still, and nothing really has changed, so to speak. I mean, we still do similar stuff. It's just now I've on my own.
That's a good approach for people out there that may be thinking about it. That approach is find somebody that may have a need, have open, candid conversations in the beginning. Hey, this is sort of maybe a temporary sort of stop for me. And then sort of the thing, you're out to lunch or whatever, like, all right, it's time. So, that's a good approach. And it gave you, sometimes I say it's sort of like riding a bike with training wheels. So you sort of had that bridge, and then you're like, all right, I'm ready. So let's talk about it. So January 2020, you're like, hell yeah, I'm about to do it. And then the world comes to an end.
Let's roll. This website looks great. This letterhead looks great. This video looks great. And then it's like, wow, this wasn't part of the plan. But what are you going to do, right? What are you going to do? You're going to just quit? You're going to just give up? I mean, that ain't going to work. It allowed me to really kind of have the time to work on stuff that were bigger than just the case itself. I'm not a huge processes guy. I'm very, I'd say, weak maybe in that. But to the extent that you have to have a process to run your firm, I could spend some time working on that, putting things in place and getting comfortable with how I was going to go about my business. And so if you look at it that way, it's kind of a blessing to give you a pause on the just grind day-to-day casework and actually work on your business, not just in your business. I'm sure that's something that you talk to your clients about. That was the time to do it, which looking back was pretty helpful.
When COVID came out, I mean, everybody was just scared as hell. I mean, we all thought, it's like we were going to die. It was like everybody's going to die. It was really sort of a weird time, and in some respects, it was scary business-wise, but in the others, I got to spend all this time with my kids. I mean, they got to, the city streets of Atlanta are pretty damn busy usually, but there were no cars. They could ride their bikes everywhere. It was actually kind of fun.
Hindsight being 2020. I mean, there's some things about COVID that I kind of miss, which is wild as hell to say, but the truth. I mean, like you said, like you see your kids a whole lot more. I remember making a really nice, elaborate dinner almost every night because that was a huge activity. You're not shuffling around every night to different practices and keeping up with crazy schedules. Traffic wasn't bad. So I'm not saying I want to go back to that kind of a world, but there's some things about it that weren't too terribly horrible.
Yeah, I remember I was coaching my son's baseball team as head coach. First time I'd done that. And I think we had gotten 4 games in the preseason, and we were undefeated. So we can say that we were undefeated when I coached the team, right?
Man, I remember when the email came out from Eastside Baseball canceling the rest of the season. And that's when I was like, oh, damn, like this is real. I mean, like that, I remember where I was, and I'm like, whoa, baseball season's over, and for a 10-year-old kid or however old it's a big deal. So I'm like, all right, here we go.
Yeah. So you talked about it gave you time to spend time with your family, get the processes down. Is that when you started your podcast too?
Mm-hmm. Exactly right.
All right, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So thank you. I love talking about that. So that was a combination of the COVID. Obviously, people were experiencing all sorts of different hobbies and toys. And also it was right when Georgia and the Braves were both at the same time making their run to titles. And those are my two teams. And so I started talking about the Braves, like their playoff series, like giving my opinions about what's going to happen or recapping the games, whatever, like on a Facebook video. And I enjoyed doing it. I like to hear myself talk, I guess, and people seem to like it. And so like, oh, that's great. Da, da, da. And then same thing happened with Georgia, and I'm talking about the Georgia stuff. And then all that just came to an end. And I was like, well, I kind of want to keep talking about things. I kind of want to keep doing something like this. How can I do it and also have it be productive towards my work and make it something that's not just talking about the Braves or Georgia, but expanding it to include my practice. And that was the idea. I listened to Tim Ferriss a lot. I don't know if you listen to Tim Ferriss, but I really liked his format of having guests on and kind of learning about them and teasing what their habits are and trying to see what made that person tick, what made them successful. And so I just reached out to 5 of my close friends. I'm like, look, this is what I'm going to do. I'd love to have you on as a guest. I bought the stuff. I did 5 episodes, and I'm like, if this sucks, no worries. I just shut it down. If it's cool and I enjoy it, I'll keep going. And I ended up liking it, and people ended up liking it, I guess. And here we are.
Well, I love the name. You haven't said that yet, so let's get a plug. I think people need to go check it out.
So the name is Sports and Tort, which is kind of a play on the two things that are my favorite, which is sports, any kind of sports, and then torts, obviously, is the type of work that I handle. It's the civil version of committing a crime, doing something wrong. You have committed a tort on somebody. So I think it was my dad that was like, well, those two words rhyme. let's go. Kind of catchy. So came up with sports and torts, and that's been the theme throughout is that, my guests are mostly lawyers, but then we do a kind of a sports spin of whatever their particular sports interests are. I've had sports guests on there too. It's not about sports law, which a lot of people will ask me. It's kind of about those two things individually, but it gives me the opportunity to talk about the two things that I like the most. And that's what I do. I mean, people always ask me like, who's your target audience? I'm sure you got that question about your podcast. Who are you trying to reach? And I'm like, I guess I'm trying to reach myself because those are the two things that I like. So I'm talking to myself, and if anybody else is listening, cool. If not, at least I'm getting a benefit out of it.
Well, I think that's key. You got to do something that you enjoy, and if you're not enjoying it, then you're not going to do it. So, I say go for it. So, and you've been doing it, how many years now?
4 years now. Yeah. So we just went over 100 episodes, which I'm pretty proud of. And I usually record from August to May and then shut down for the summer. I was just telling you, I'm kind of itching to get going. It's been a couple months now, and I need that to just kind of recharge. And because as it's a big commitment to do these and dedicate the time to do it. And I think, as I told you, I'll tell anybody who listens, if you're going to do it, you have to do it regularly, right? There's no point in doing it once every month or 6 weeks or 2 months. It's just no point to that, in my opinion, at least. So you got to dedicate yourself to doing it regularly.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you 100%. If you're not going to do it all the time, if you're not going to be consistent, then you shouldn't do it all. I used to say, as I thought about, for years I wanted to do a podcast, and it's gotten easier to do. There's more resources. Back then it was like, I didn't know what to buy, I didn't know how to produce it, all that kind of stuff. You can outsource just about all that now. So it's way easier than it used to be.
I think people are kind of unimpressed when I explain to them the process. Like they think it's going to be a whole lot more of an in-depth thing to do. And when I tell them, they're like, oh, that's it? I'm like, yeah, that's it. I mean, you can get really fancy. I mean, I love your setup that you got going on. But like you said, they've made it pretty darn easy to do it. So there's no excuse not to try if you really want to.
That said, I don't know who knows where the stats come from, but they have that stat where most, some huge 90+% don't get past 3 episodes, and then some even smaller percentage get to like 20. You got to 100. That's pretty impressive. That's consistency.
Well, I had lunch with somebody last week who had just started a podcast, and they were on episode like 12 or 13, and they were kind of down on themselves about it. And I was like, look, man, you have done better than 90+% of anybody that has tried this. And because your number is dead on. I mean, I don't know what the exact stat is, but getting past 10 is a small percentage of people that actually can stick to it even that long. So I told him, I said, be proud of yourself, man.
Well, I'll tell you, some days it feels like you're just talking into the void. You don't know if anybody's listening. You don't know if anybody really cares. What sort of feedback have you gotten?
What a great question that is, because I cared a lot in the beginning about who was listening. And I had that software that would track all sorts of metrics. And you know what I did? I think I might have told you this before. I've shut that all off. I cannot access those numbers anymore because you know what? I don't really care. I care, but I don't care, if that makes sense. I was so concerned with how many downloads is this episode going to get? Does that, make it, does it validate the fact that I'm doing it? And for me, that was the wrong approach because my idea was never to get to a certain viewership number and sell ads or get sponsorship dollars or things like that. Like that was never my goal. So then what do I care if it's 50 people or 5,000 that are listening? And that freed my mind up to not worry about that part of it and just focus on, am I enjoying still doing it? The answer is yes. Do the guests seem to be enjoying the conversations, which the resounding feedback is, man, that was fun, Josh. I'm glad we did that. Thanks for having me on. And do I hear from people just around town, hey, listen to the podcast with Jonathan Hawkins. Man, he was great. Didn't know that about him. Now I do. That's the kind of stuff that really makes me feel good. When I go to Christmas parties, work Christmas parties, like that's the conversation that people come up and have with me. It's about that. So that tells me that people are at least listening, they're seeing it, and that's good. That's good enough for me.
Well, I could tell you have fun. I mean, it's an entertaining show. So for anybody out there, go find it. Sports and Torts. Go listen. It's a good one.
I appreciate that.
And you're probably, looking for guests all the time. So, you do yours a lot of times in person, which I've never done. So that's a different format as well. I think it's probably a little easier, a little more, the in-person interaction and maybe a little more enjoyable. But
yeah, for me, that's just something that I wanted to do. I mean, the first one I did was with one of my best friends from college, and he came over and we both poured a drink just because that's what we thought we were supposed to be doing. Right. And we just talked for an hour, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of like the way this feels. So, I do catch some heat for, drinking and food being kind of a big part of, what the podcast is. But the reality is that makes it more fun for me. I mean, like when you came over to my office, it was 4:00 on a Thursday, you pour bourbon, you talk, and it's just a fun experience. I've done plenty of these, online, and that's great too. There's not one way that's better than the other. It's just kind of the way I've gone about it.
real quick, thanks for listening. If you're getting any value out of this podcast, please take 2 seconds to hit the subscribe button and leave a 5-star review. It would really mean a lot to me. Now back to the show. All right, so since you're taking the summer off, we're gonna have to talk some sports here now. And the Braves, it has been, oh my God, I've sort of stopped tuning in. We were World Series favorites to just everybody getting hurt. It's just been awful.
It's been awful, man. I've been and this is a tough word to use, but I've been pretty uninterested in the Braves this year, if that makes sense. And that's not like me. I love the Braves. I mean, I get the direct TV stream strictly so I can watch the Braves because you can't find them anywhere else on the TV. But I've just found them uninteresting this year. It's not anybody's fault. The injury bug has just destroyed them. And now the team they're trotting out there is just not capable to compete, which is sad. I mean, how they're holding on to a wild card spot still is just a testament to Snitker and the depth that AA's put together. And thank goodness for our pitching staff. But I mean, it's not built to last at this point, unfortunately, for this year. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah, we can always look back to the World Series title year where they had an awful first half and just turned it on right there at the end. Miracles.
That's what we're telling ourselves, right? I mean, that's the model. Acuna goes down. We'll see. I don't know when you're going to release this podcast, but we're right into July. And so, we'll see the trade deadline, what the moves are. You can make some arguments that, maybe you become a seller. I mean, as sad as that is to say if you're leading the wild card to sell, but you can make the argument that Max Fried is more valuable as a trade piece right now than holding on to him for the remainder of the season, hoping you can make a run, probably can't, and then losing him to free agency. So I can make that argument. I don't want to see it happen, but I think it's going to be super interesting over these next week or so to see how this plays out from AA's perspective.
Yeah, he's been very, very good on the trade deadline for the last however many years. So, but it just, in my mind, it seems hard to see that they could make any moves to try to make a run. But so, yeah, you're right. It's like maybe we get something.
We'll find out. We'll find out. I mean, I'll tell you, though, the crowds are still going. I mean, the product down at Truist Park is still a very good product. And what I mean by that is just the overall stadium experience, the battery, the in-game entertainment and activities are still very good. And the crowds are still very good. So I like seeing that.
Yeah, the battery's awesome. I've not been to a game yet this year. We'll see. It's really hot right about now. So
yeah, wait till September.
So yeah, shifting again. So another thing you mentioned, you said you were recording these videos. I see that you do a lot of video work, and it's all over social media, at least the ones I'm on. And so, how long have you been doing that? When did you start that? Was that a COVID thing also? Or did you start before?
Before. I mean, that was something that I felt was my one marketing tool that I should and could easily do. I've never been somebody who was going to be on a billboard. Nothing wrong with that, just not me. I'm not advertising on TV, on the radio. I'm not trying to mass promote myself to just the entire city or state or whatever. I'm focusing more on my network, on my community, people that frankly already know me, and just make sure that they keep me in mind and I'm top of their mind when something comes up. And so those videos were a way for me, I think, to, as you said, just pop up in feeds like, oh, there's Josh again talking about whatever. And so the hope is, not that I hope anybody gets hurt, but if they do, or they know someone that does, like, oh yeah, I remember Josh talked about if your child gets hurt in a daycare, do this, or if you hit by a truck, do that. And so, yeah, I mean, I've enjoyed doing that. Again, the word that is consistency. I think if you're going to do it, you got to do it. So that's another thing I've just kind of said, okay, Josh, if you're going to do this, you got to keep doing it.
So you're good at it. I mean, you're good in front of a camera, and I'm not just saying that. There's some people that are not very good at it. I'm not sure if I am. I haven't really done enough of it. I keep telling myself I need to do it. So you got to coach me here. You got to get me motivated. So let me ask: Are you just a natural, or is this something that you had to learn, or maybe a little of both?
I appreciate those kind words. I don't know if I'm good at it. I think what I've come to the realization over the years is I can be relaxed about it. I think in the beginning, a lot of people are so worried about making sure every word is right, your message is perfect, everything looks right. Do you think people really care if something is perfect? They really don't. I mean, what I've learned is that if I do a 60-second video, people are dropping off 15 seconds in, 20 seconds in, 30 seconds in. It's not because they don't like what I'm saying. That's just the attention span of people that are out there. My goal, I don't think, needs to be to keep someone's attention with great content for 60 seconds. Well, that would be great and it's desirable and I hope it happens. My goal is just, hey, let's just see Josh again, talking about this, talking about that. Let's listen to 15 seconds. He'll say something good and move on to the next. I think that should be the goal. And so if you look at it that way, there's less pressure to put out like the perfect video, right? You can just be more relaxed and kind of go about it that way. So that's kind of how I think about it.
So let me ask about your process. So how do you go about doing it? And I want to dive in some specifics here. So, sure. And that includes sort of like, how do you get your ideas? How do you script them out? How do you record? Do you batch them? I mean, what's your process on doing your videos? And then how do you produce them? That's the other thing.
Yeah. So Kayla Lamont, I will give a plug to her. I met her many years ago at a different job that she had that was working in the legal space, and we got to know each other. And when I started doing my own plaintiff's work, I found out that she was doing these social media videos, and so I connected with her, and I still work with her to this day. And so what we do is she comes to my office once a month. We record 12 videos. This has kind of progressed over the years. We started out doing just 4, one a week, and now we're up to 12, which I think is the sweet spot. I don't want to be an everyday guy, but I think 3 days a week is appropriate to these videos. So she shows up on whatever date, July 1st, and we do 12 videos. And my goal is for each one to be between 45 seconds and a minute. It used to take me multiple takes. Now it's usually one take, maybe 2. She's pretty good at saying like, Josh, that's good. Let's just move on to the next. Kind of back to what I was saying in the beginning of it doesn't have to be perfect. And then she takes all 12. She goes and does her magic and makes it look good and edits it and does the backgrounds and all those kinds of things. And then every few days, she sends me the video that's done. And then I upload it to Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever it is that I do. And I do all the not the comments, but the posts, but she would do that too if I wanted her to. But yeah, I found that if I just batch them all at one time, that's the most efficient way to do it. I used to do good at like planning out my topics. And as the month is going on, if I think of something, it's like put it down and, get back to it and just keep adding. Now kind of the day before, I'm like, oh crap, tomorrow's recording day. I got to come up with 12 things to talk about. And she's pretty good too. Like she'll send me a text like, hey, here's a couple of things I was thinking about. And at the end, we just get to 12. I mean, I feel like, I'm going to run out of things to talk about, but there's always something that's current, something that happened in one of my cases, something I think is important to talk about. And so that's what we do.
For me, it's inertia, and it's inertia. You just gotta start. I think it sounds like it's probably helpful to have someone come and actually do it. So you're like, all right, she's coming. I got to get ready. Where if it's just me and my iPhone, I can come up with 100 things to do instead of recording. So I don't record. You
just nailed it. I mean, I can't tell you how many times she usually gets here at 10:30. I can't tell you how many times it's like 9:00 that morning and I'm like tapping out a text to her. It's like, hey, can we push this to next week? Right? Because there's always something that you can do. There's always something you want to be doing. And I'm like, you know what? No, this is on the schedule. It's on the calendar. Let's do it. If she wasn't coming and it was just me, you better damn believe I wouldn't have gone forward at 10:30 and knocked him out. So I've never thought about it that way you just put it. But you're exactly right. I mean, she's like my business coach for videos to hold me accountable to making sure that I do it. Right. And I think her being on the other side of the camera makes me more comfortable because it's almost like, not almost, it is like I'm just talking to her. Like it's a conversation where I'm looking at her versus staring blankly into a camera.
That's a good point. I may have to get her info offline here when we're done here.
She's great, man.
So yeah, so we've talked about a couple things you do marketing wise. So you know your podcast, that's sort of for fun, but I mean it's got a marketing component to it as well. You got your videos. What other sorts of things do you do?
Yeah, so I consider my marketing being community marketing is the word that I use. I don't know if that's a correct term or not, but I live in East Cobb. I'm from East Cobb. A lot of connections in East Cobb. And so I just want to foster all of those relationships so that if anybody in East Cobb gets hurt or they know someone that gets hurt, like I'm the first person they think about. So we sponsor, Walton's our local high school. We sponsor their football team, their baseball team, their volleyball team, the middle school. When my son, daughter there, we sponsor them with whatever they need. Same with elementary school. Indian Hills Country Club is the golf course that everybody's a member at. So we sponsor that. We do the local fun runs. We do the local parades, whatever it might be, because I'm not competing with, the Morgans and the Morgans of the world there or John Foy. Like I can just kind of focus on that little area and that's enough for my firm. Right. And so I think that is time, energy, and resources that are better spent. And it makes me feel good. I like going to the Walton football game and hearing my name over the intercom. We thank our sponsors, Josh Stein Law Firm, for whatever. I mean, it makes me feel good, and it's helping my firm out at the same time. So that's been my approach. I hope it remains my approach because I think that for me, it works pretty well, or I hope it does at least.
And that's a great point for the people out there. I mean, you've seen it. If you're on any social media, if you're just around, it's like there are all these gurus now. Scale, grow, blah, 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 blah. You got to do this, got to do that. You got to have 100 internet ads. You got billboard, whatever it is. And you feel this pressure, or at least you're like, well, maybe I should be doing these things. Well, really, no, you don't. It's like figure out what you want and just dominate sort of your space. It sounds like is what you're doing. And I got to tell you, your videos, for example, they show up in my feed all the time. And that is like a billboard. It might be better than a billboard, really.
Yeah. Yeah. To your point, it's hard to ignore, as you correctly put out, like all the noise of people do this, do that, 100 this, 100 that, scale, especially the kind of work that I do, because, it's like if you're not having the biggest settlement or the biggest verdict or the biggest firm or the biggest this or the biggest that, like, are you even relevant? And so that can be a hard kind of thing to just sit back and watch. So, I think you got to be kind of comfortable in your own skin and comfortable in knowing that the path that I'm choosing or my firm is choosing, whatever that path is the right one for you, and really not try to get caught up with, the old slogan, keeping up with the Joneses. I think in the plaintiff's world, the kind of work I do, that could be a very dangerous game to play. There is no way I can keep up money-wise spending with Morgan & Morgan or John Foy. I can't do it. So why even try? Like, why play their game? I'm never going to win their game. They can't win my game, so let me just play mine.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast. I think it's Dan Kennedy, sort of a direct marketing guru. He said, there's no value. It's not exactly what you're saying, but he's like, there's no value. If you're going to be in the low-cost world, there's no value to being the second lowest cost provider. Right. If you're going to do it, you got to be top. And that's the same with the advertisers. You got to be, if you're going to play that game, you've got to spend money like crazy. And at this point, I'm not sure that many people can get into that game. So don't even play it.
Yeah, if I were to spend $10,000 a month on Google Ads, which is a lot of money to me and my firm, what's that going to do? Probably not much of anything, right? So it's like, why even try? At least that's what I tell myself. I might be wickedly wrong on this, but that's at least what I tell myself.
Well, this is a good segue. So we're talking about growth a little bit, and you're growing, right? So you're adding an attorney here. So tell me about that.
Yeah, it's great. His background is very similar to mine, and he was looking to start doing plaintiff's work, and we were talking about kind of how I got into it. And just like I told you, my start with Andy, I told him the same thing. And I told him that, that's a great option for him if he finds the right situation. And, as things go, we start talking more about it and my needs and his were aligned. And so, yeah, it's super excited. He's a great lawyer. He's worked on big cases. He can hit the ground running, doing pretty good, doing really good work, and allows me to, cases that I would used to refer out, or cases that, I'd have somebody else work on with me. Now he can be that person. So it's a big benefit to my firm. I'm excited for him to get going, and he's going to really do well.
You're paying it forward, sort of like Andy did for you, right?
I think so. I mean, I think that in a perfect world, in 2 or 3 years, he's got his own firm, and he's still in the space with me and Andy like he is now, and he's rocking and rolling, and it just continues on. And then maybe somebody else comes and wants to work with me, or someone wants to work with him, or whatever it might be. I mean, that's the beauty of doing the kind of jobs that we do. I mean, there's so much flexibility in how firms are set up. I mean, I can only imagine that you have seen every possible way a business and a law firm can be set up and run with the work you do. And it's just really fascinating how many different ways you can, as they say, skin the cat and set things up. It's really cool.
The plaintiff's world is also a collaborative, I would say, part, mostly in the legal industry. So, you guys are co-counseling all over the place with people from different firms all the time anyway. So it just sort of makes sense. So it's a good setup, I would think.
I think so. I mean, I know he's excited. Same things that was a benefit that were kind of appealing to me about Andy. He sees that about me, which makes me feel good, And yeah, he started just this month and up and running. I mean, we've got 2 paralegals, and then I contract out a lot of stuff. I mean, I'm very big on the, not having necessarily somebody on my payroll do the work, from accounting to payroll to marketing to, you name it. If I can contract out that person, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second, just real quick, sort of the structure. So you've got, in terms of full-time versus VAs versus contractors, vendors, whatever. I'm curious sort of your setup and how over time you sort of figured it out. Maybe Andy helped you with some of this, sort of gave you some advice, but, when you started your own firm, how did you go down the chain of, all right, I need somebody to help me with this and those decisions?
Yeah. So my overriding principle is low overhead. I just think that for a plaintiff's firm, especially starting out, is just huge. You don't get hamstrung with huge space expenses and payroll costs and health insurance costs. If you can avoid all that best you can, I just think that's a good idea. I wanted to do as much of things in the beginning as I could, so I learned how to do it. I mean, I'll be honest, man. Like the first time I had to mail out a letter certified, are we in a trust tree right here for me to say that I didn't know how to do that necessarily?
I hate it. Yeah.
And that's just the God's honest truth. The first time I had to e-file a complaint, I didn't know how to do it, but I wanted to. And so, it was just me for the first, however long. Then my wife joined to pick up some of that stuff. Again, can you get a better employee that's vested in the firm than, your wife or husband, whatever it might be? So she was the first kind of hire, I guess I would say. I know that scares people off a lot, working with your spouse, but it worked for us. I mean, she didn't come into the office, which I think was a big help. She worked from home, but she had no legal background, but she's smart. She's good at computers. She can figure things out. She's good at marketing. And so she was really instrumental in that first, 6 months to 9 months to really get me going until I hired, a paralegal who could really start taking over. And that's Melissa. So those are the 2. And then I've got a contract paralegal who focuses a lot on getting medical records, on getting out letters of rep. She does not come to the office. She's very task-based stuff. Like I said, we outsource all the accounting. We outsource all the payroll. Kayla does a lot of as I mentioned, does a lot of the video stuff. She's not an employee of mine. And that's the way I've gone about it. And that's why I want to keep it. I'm not looking to, have 20 employees and a bunch of office space and all that kind of stuff. All that's great. And it works for a lot of people. I came from a world with lots of overhead and lots of employees and lots of TPS reports and lots of meetings. And I don't want to do any of that anymore. I want to just focus on practicing law.
It's the world we live in. In some respects, it's more competitive and those sorts of things, but it's so much easier to really start a firm and get just connect the pieces that you need, and not have to hire them. I mean, even 10 years ago, it was just so hard. I mean, just with COVID accelerating, having the virtual thing, the overseas VAs. I mean, there's so many options you can have nowadays.
Have you gone the overseas VA route? Have you looked into doing any of that?
So I've started experimenting with that.
Yeah.
You know, I've had a lot of people that have done it. They swear by it. And so I've started that. I had one and had to get rid of her, and we're about to line up another one. And it's, you know, because a lot of what we do can be virtual. I'm a big believer in office, not just to be there, but I just feel like there's some value there. And there's just some things that you can only do in person. I mean, frankly, like if I need to mail a letter, somebody's got to be here to do it, right? You can't send that to an overseas person.
No, I'm totally with you. I mean, I was one of these guys during COVID. I still came in every day. I mean, we had a small footprint, so it wasn't like we had a big firm that they said stay away. I mean, I just like being in the office. Could I do everything from my house? Yes. Do I want to do that? No, for many reasons. But I just like being in the office. All my people are here in the office. I mean, of course, I told you my wife is not, but Andy's here every day. You know, Derek's here every day. We got another lawyer, Chris Gunnels. I don't know if you know him, but he shares space with us. He's here. I just like people being around.
It's just more enjoyable for me, at least. It sounds like for you too.
100%.
So, all right. So you've been going at it for a while with your firm. Why don't you you've got somebody out there that's thinking about maybe starting something. You got any advice for them? Do
it, right? I mean, I think that's the number one piece of advice I give people is if you want to do it and you're thinking about it, just do it. I really, truly think that's the hardest part of it is just making that decision. And I say, burn the boats, be on the island and burn the boats. And what I mean by that is if you're going to do it, go all in. Don't give yourself some hedges to get out. Don't give yourself some crutches to fall on. I think you've got to burn the boats. And the only way you get off that island is figuring it out. And I think that through that kind of a process, you force yourself to go that extra step or that extra mile or do the extra thing because you don't have a choice, right? To your point, it's not overly complicated in 2024 to get what you need to start a firm. I was just talking to Derek about really with a internet connection, a good computer, a telephone, an iPhone, you can make some noise. You can do some damage with just those few things. And so just do it. So I say, it's a Nike ad. Just do it.
Yeah. So as you're sitting here today, what's your vision? Where do you see yourself going with this? Have you looked that far down the road to see?
I have.
What you want your firm to be like?
I have
5, 10, 15 years.
I have such a lame answer to that question, but I'll give you the answer because you asked the question. So I have repeating 1 year goals, and that's it. And the goal every year is not to hit a certain amount of revenue. It's not to hire a certain number of people. My goal is on January 1st the following year to make sure that my firm is in a situation where I can continue on doing it how I want to do it for the next year. Meaning I don't have to go work for somebody else or go back into a defense firm or do something I don't want to do. So as long as every year I'm able to continue down the path that I'm currently on, that's all I really care about.
I think that's a great answer. And again, we touched on this earlier. Some people want to scale, some people don't. Some people feel like they should scale. Some people, don't know what to do. But it sounds like you've pretty much got a clear idea of what you want, and you've sort of designed your firm to suit the life you want to live and give you the freedom you want, it sounds like. And then that's probably more important than anything.
It is. I mean, we went out of the country for 10 days in July, and I was able to pretty much not worry about other people like at my office, at my firm. If I had a big firm and lots of operations, I don't think I could do that, right? There was always be some sort of an issue coming up with somebody that I would have to deal with. At least that's what I think. I could be wrong. So
I think you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's kind of how I look at it, is that I want to worry about myself. I want to be accountable to myself. If I fail, it's because of me. I can't make excuses as anybody else. If I succeed, I know it's because of me. Well, a lot of people help, but you know what I mean? And that's good enough for me.
Well, I think that's perfectly respectable way to go. And more people should probably take that approach than trying to pursue something that somebody else is telling them they should do, right?
Right.
All right, last question, man. So if you weren't practicing law, if you couldn't practice law, what would you be doing?
I'd like to just record these podcasts with you all day, get paid for that. That'd be pretty damn fun. I'm enjoying this. That'd be a pretty good gig is being able to be on a podcast or be on some kind of a show and just have people care enough to want to listen to what you have to say, right? Growing up, being a sportscaster was kind of what my parents tell me I always was trending to want to do. I didn't end up going to school to do journalism or sportscasting, but I think if I could, pick, that's probably what I'd want to do. If I'm not playing the sport, I think it'd be pretty neat to be broadcasting it.
Well, you're sort of there, man. You could, I don't know, have you had any actual professional athletes on your podcast yet?
I have. I've had a couple of the Falcons came on. I've had, you remember Dr. Jack Llewellyn, who was the sports psychologist for the Braves back with Smoltz and all them. Mm-hmm. He's been on. So, different people connect me to different folks for various reasons, but I have had a handful. That's been really fun.
There you go. There's your pivot. I mean, Atlanta is such a great place for athletes. I mean, a lot of them live here, even if they don't play here. So They're everywhere.
Exactly.
And I tell my son that's sort of, it's unfair in the youth sports because you got some of these athlete kids that are giants out there. Pretty scary.
Yeah, man, it's size is the big determining factor in youth sports, and there's nothing you can do about it. It is what it is. That the big kids at this age, they're the ones that dominate. But as you get older and get into high school, all that kind of levels out a little bit, and you want to be the one with the good fundamentals, the good practice principles, the good way of going about it. And then when size evens out, those are the kids I think that are going to really rise to the top.
Yeah. Well, cool. If anybody wants to get in touch with you, they can find your podcast, obviously, but what's the best way to find you?
Yeah, thank you. So my website is www.jsteinlawfirm.com, JSTEIN lawfirm.com. Phone number is 404-418-6379. Facebook page is J Stein Law Firm. Instagram, I believe, is J Stein Law Firm. LinkedIn is just my name. And again, I will return the favor to you, compliment to you. Your LinkedIn game is the best in the business, period, hard stop. You're the best in business on LinkedIn. So kudos to you on that.
Well, I appreciate it. So when does the season start for Sports and Torts?
Podcast Sports and Torts. You can just type that in. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, all of it. So I typically will do my first episode right before Labor Day, right before Georgia kicks off their football season. That's kind of the first show typically we do. I might be a little earlier this year. I've got a couple of guests that I'm excited about that on a little bit sooner than that. And again, I'm just kind of antsy to get going, but it'll be mid to late August. We'll get up and run again, and we'll try to run through May.
Cool, man. Well, looking forward to it. Thanks again for coming on, and I'll be seeing your videos in my feed. So
hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm proud of you doing this. You're doing a great job. I've listened to a bunch of your episodes, and just keep going, man. Keep doing it. I love it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.yourlawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.